Welcome everyone to this video for the 9 Principles of Spiritual Recovery. I'm Ken. Thanks for being here. Hope you find something of value in this video about the spiritual principle of reauthorization. This is the third in a series on the spiritual practice of reauthorization. This video will focus on taking ownership of my words and deeds. I heard an excellent speaker last weekend give a talk at a church service, and I was struck by her statement, "We cannot become ignorant again." Well, God bless them. Folks try every day to forget what they've learned in life, but like the ostrich, they find that the hole they want to stick their heads back in is closed up on them. I guess what the speaker was saying, I think, and this is only what I think, was that once we've done some soul searching and some self-awareness building, and we recognize that we are, in our essence, spirit energy, or spirit simply, that we cannot go back to not recognizing and not understanding that basic truth of reality, and our lives have to change accordingly. It isn't enough to just go forward in life like we don't get it. We have to see ourselves as divine in our nature, and therefore worthy of being cared for and nurtured and taught and loved. We cannot abuse that which and those who we truly love, and that includes ourselves. So accordingly, when we recognize that we've said or done something that has hurt someone else out of ignorance and free will, we have to take ownership for those behaviors by accepting responsibility and accountability. She also pointed out the reason for spiritual practice is to peel back the layers of the ego. For me, spiritual practice is the same thing as coping skill building, which includes developing a wide range of habits of mind or thinking patterns that help us deal with life problems and reach our full potentials. Some of the, quote, layers of the ego contain false beliefs, transferred emotional problems, misconceptions, faulty memories, and the baggage we've collected in our life experience that limit our ascension, our path towards self-actualization, or true spiritual recovery from harmful and hurtful experiences. And the speaker also suggested we all be careful not to confuse interpretation with truth. So remember the expression, there are 3 sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth. Well, basically this means don't mistake your own perception of reality for the truth of reality. They are likely to be 2 different things. Our human brains aren't perfect, and our mental emotional skills are often not all that well calibrated. So we often mistake what we believe to be true and real with what the rest of creation believes to be real and true. And the dark empath says, my subjectivity disagrees with your objectivity. So reauthorization is an essential spiritual practice to build so that we can look at our lives and see any need for making some changes in the direction we're heading. Reauthorization is part of that peeling back the layers of the ego. So a quick review of reauthorization. It's the process of empowering oneself again and taking ownership for one's words and deeds. That is essentially giving ourselves the ability to determine, create, and put into place the kind of life we want, and then taking ownership or responsibility and accountability for the things we do and say. And it's summed up by this statement, I am responsible and accountable for my feelings, thoughts, beliefs, and actions, and their effects on myself and others. Reauthorization is coming to the realization that each of us has the right and the responsibility to empower ourselves and reclaim our personal power And by taking ownership of our words and deeds, we put ourselves on the path to self-actualization, or fulfilling our highest potential as spiritual human beings. And reauthorization is again giving oneself that power to originate and create, or to come up with and put into place, or to author our plan for beginning to change and recreate our lives. And related to recovery, in that we regain or reclaim that power, that ability to take charge of our own life again, which is empowerment, and once again take ownership for our lives through responsibility and accountability. So we've talked about reauthorization as a spiritual practice having three parts, and that is working with spirit to recognize the need for change and growth, to author plans for creating opportunities to succeed in living our own lives, and third, to take ownership for our words and deeds. And this video was about taking ownership. And ownership is acknowledgement of one's responsibility and accountability in a situation. When you're responsible and accountable, you own it. Responsibility is this ability to answer for or explain our words and deeds, to accept what we've said or done. Basically, I said it or I did it. And accountability is being held, or being able to be held, in a position to explain an action or a behavior and to accept any related consequences. Essentially, I'll pay for or atone for what I said or what I did. So reauthorization helps us better understand who we really are by making us look at our experiences and our genetic predispositions to explain how we became the persons we've become, and to help us understand those things about ourselves we might want to change. We, quote, peel back the layers of the ego that include those false beliefs and unmet expectations from childhood and later life that may have resulted in adopting unhealthy ways of living. This LifeCoachesToolbox.com website has what they call the 7 P's of ego. So this being 9 P's, I figured why not? And they have a kind of a graphic representation on that website of all of these different types of false beliefs and misconceptions, negative attitudes, all of these kinds of things that kind of comprise the layers of the ego. And it's way too much for me to go into, but if you go to that website, they do a really nice job with it. So I strongly encourage you to take a look at it. We often hear ego referred to as, quote, the ego. And I want to say here that, to me, the term the ego tends to denote something that's generic and usually negative. And I equate ego with identity. And so to me, the more useful term might be my ego, since that denotes ownership or possession of something that's specific and unique to me. It's mine. I own my identity, my ego, and I'm okay with that. It's essentially what makes me me. And that would be my experience and my genetics, what I'm predisposed to based on who my parents and other ancestors were. When we combine those two, we get oneness, which is another word for identity. So to me, identity and oneness, oneness and ego and identity, all roughly the same thing. I also want to say that ego isn't the same thing as selfishness. It's not even the same thing as self-centeredness or egocentricity. Self-centeredness can actually be protective in early recovery. Our sense of self, of who we are as individual persons, can become confused and a sort of source of stress and of relapse. So the more we understand who we really are, the more likely we are to build self-confidence, self-worth, and self-esteem, and the less likely we are to behave in ways that are self-harming or self-abusive, or to treat others that way. So why don't or won't some people take ownership of their words and deeds? Well, they deny. I think we had a president who advised us to do that. In some of the earlier videos, we talked about homeostasis being one of the reasons why people tend not to recognize the need for change and growth. And this is the biological idea that an organism has an inclination to seek an acceptable level of balance or an equilibrium between their internal and external systems in order to achieve a state of stability. So the internal and the external, they try to get some sort of a sense of balance there so that they can have predictability in their lives. You don't want this thing tipping over. The problem is that for some people, what is considered an acceptable level of balance becomes an acceptable level of misery. And this is actually the title of a album by Death Crawl, and it's a phrase from this the Malazan Book of the Fallen. People get to a point where they're just kind of like, it ain't that bad. So we've all heard that expression, misery loves company. Well, misery loves miserable company. If you aren't miserable when you start a relationship with a miserable person, they'll make you miserable as soon as they feel like they can and get away with it. And you won't realize you're miserable until you're tied to the bedpost, and not in a good way. It's James Caan's feet. James Caan just passed away last month, July. So some people refuse to consider change even when the situation is unhealthy or toxic. Because to them, it ain't that bad. It's basically like the frogs being brought to a boil. As I hear it, you drop a cold-blooded frog, and I'm not making a judgment here. They're biologically cold-blooded. You drop a cold-blooded frog into boiling water, and it'll jump out. Put it into room temp water in a pot, bring it to a boil. The frog will cook without jumping out, or so I hear. We at the Nine Principles haven't tested this out on any frogs. It's not our thing. We don't recommend or approve of frog boiling, okay? All right. But if this frog could talk, he'd probably be saying, it ain't that bad. Do I really need to change anything? And if you look at the eyes on that frog, pretty red. I'd say that dude is probably more baked than he is boiled. But either way, he's in the pot. He ain't jumping out. So why don't or won't people consider making life changes? Well, fear of the consequences of change for starters. Just lack the courage to do it. And that's because they fear losing relationships or a place to live or friendships, even losing their identity or ego confusion. Who am I? Without this lifestyle, who am I? Mental health problems, failure. What if this doesn't work? Withdrawal symptoms when you're talking about addiction. And that's even process addiction, things like, internet porn or gambling, things like that. When people stop doing them, they actually feel a psychological and even sometimes a physical withdrawal. And also they fear the expectations of others. Either they're going to be expected to do too much, or people are going to kind of give up on them and not expect anything. Immaturity is another reason. Fellows from Superbad. And immaturity is kind of defined as a personality trait disturbance characterized by childish, emotional, and behavioral patterns. Things like social anxiety, inappropriate humor, mood swings, instant gratification, risky behaviors, poor decision making and judgment, violence, self-centeredness, which again sometimes can be okay, and rebelliousness. Again, a certain amount of rebelliousness is okay, but taken to an extreme, it's not a good thing, not healthy. Irresponsibility is another reason why people don't recognize the need to make change and won't consider it. We have old Sergeant Schultz, I hear nothing, I see nothing, I know nothing. And that shows up as fear of commitment, passive-aggressive anger, disloyalty, no filter statements, people not considering the consequences of what they say, defensive or combative or confrontational or contrarian type communications, being unsupportive of others, lacking empathy and compassion, lacking integrity or kind of a whole personality, and also honesty, and then stonewalling or putting things off, telling somebody you're going to do something and then not doing it. Yeah, I'll meet you over here, and then they never show up. And that works into the unreliability. Also, passivity is another reason. This is a big reason. This is old Doris Day. So things like go with the flow, it is what it is, wasn't meant to be, it's all in God's hands. Que sera, sera. That's Doris. It's God's will. If it's supposed to happen, it's out of my hands. My personal favorite, everything happens for a reason. I'm going to talk a little bit more about passivity. And this station, this channel, is called the 9 Principles of Spiritual Recovery. So we do accept that there are a lot of different ways that folks attempt to incorporate spirit or spiritual practice into their lives in order to kind of give them some guidance about how to live. And a lot of times that kind of passivity inhibits the change and growth process. And things that get taken to an extreme that in, low level use are fine. Nice distraction, entertainment, whatever it is, even, provides a little bit of opportunity for growth, introspection, that kind of thing. But when they're relied on to the detriment of other things in a person's life, then they can become an issue. And, I'll just say it here, these are all things that I've done. And again, taken to an extreme can become a real problem for people. And I've seen it. Psychics can be overused, over-relied upon, depended on. And I've seen folks that have become dependent on mediums even, and mediums who have kind of played on that for a bunch of different reasons, some of them fairly disappointing and even disgusting in a few cases that I've seen, and doesn't make me happy because I do believe that there's a place for folks who have that ability in order to help folks, to help them heal, help them, guide them along in life. There's a place. Again, tarot. I'll talk about that in another video at some point. Have an interesting little anecdote about this. There's the dark empath. It's in the cards. Either that or it ain't in the cards, one or the other. In religion. This is probably my all-time favorite movie. Oh, brother, where art thou? This is a scene down along the riverside where the folks are coming to be baptized. This is a depression. Times are hard. And Everett kind of laughing about it. He says something like, hard times flush out the chumps. And he says, I guess everyone's looking for answers. Now I want to go back to this slide for a second. This everything happens for a reason statement. That expression drives me absolutely crazy. A lot of spiritual things, quote, spiritual things, drive me crazy because they seem to encourage passivity in the guise of connectivity. And for me, passivity is kind of low volume disconnectivity. I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard some spiritual person trot this one out. It makes no sense to me in terms of natural law or universal law. Everything happens. That to me is an effect. And reason, that to me is a cause. So this statement, everything happens for a reason, turns the law of cause and effect into the law of effect and cause. So instead of karma, we get Amrak. And to me, this is passive. Everything happens for a reason. That's passive. That allows people to duck responsibility for the consequences of the things that they do, which is the antithesis of taking ownership for our words and deeds. So let's just kind of get that out of our heads for a second. The law of cause and effect, or karma, or action, is an if-then statement. If something happens, then something else will happen to boot. So if we said something like, there is a reason why a thing happens, or there are reasons why everything happens, then to me we've got this in logical order. So now we are back to the laws of cause and effect. And this is active. Again, an action statement. It's active. It's not passive. So there is a reason why a thing happens. So if something crappy happens in our life, look backward. Maybe you'll find what the reason was. And maybe that reason is something within your control or your power to change. Wouldn't that be something? The previous video was about creating opportunities to succeed in living our lives in order to resolve problems and build self-confidence. And taking ownership for our words and deeds also builds our self-confidence because we know we can be responsible and accountable for what we say and do. And self-confidence comes from taking ownership for our words and deeds. We know we can be responsible and accountable for what we say and do. We build character and identity. So again, if you watched the last video, you know this is the self-esteem staircase. This time it's revisited. We have self-efficacy, or this feeling of being able to take care of the small things in life, which builds our self-confidence, or the feeling of being able to take care of the big things in life, which enhances our sense of self-worth, or the value we place on ourselves as people, persons. And that enhances our self-esteem, or the opinion we have of ourselves, or the regard and respect we have for ourselves. And again, being responsible and accountable for our words and deeds builds our self-confidence, and by extension, our self-esteem. And self-esteem is self-respect, is self-love. Now, we've said before, self-love won't allow for self-abuse. Just like if we love someone else, we won't intentionally be abusive toward them. As we develop our self-love, we tend not to be so abusive to ourselves or to other people. And that's a very welcome change for most folks. Next video, we're going to be talking about reauthorization as a spiritual practice related to substance abuse or drug addiction. And as we've said before, substance abuse is self-abuse, and anybody who is at the point where they are addicted to drugs or any kind of process addiction, they're abusing themselves, and it's time for a change. And just to wrap up the thought, self-love won't allow for substance abuse. Once we actually care about ourselves, respect ourselves, we're not going to do anything that we know is self-abusive. And we know that drug addiction is self-abusive. So we'll talk more about that in the next video. So it's time to do a little bit of work here. This is something you can put into your 9 Principles Spiritual Recovery Journal if you'd like. If you have some other place that you're storing these things, feel free to continue to do so. But basically, just kind of record your ideas and thoughts about the following exercises somewhere. And the spiritual practice is taking ownership of my words and deeds. I'm going to use the stress resistant behavior cycle again for this. I've used it in the past for other things, and this is another seemingly appropriate application for it. And again, stress resistant behavior cycle has 9 phases, and these are those. And you'll see how we use this in a second. So when it comes to stressors, what have I said or done that is now causing me stress? How is this, answering this question, going to help me take ownership for my words and deeds? Well, what have I said or done that's causing me stress? That's one way to figure things out. In terms of feelings, what emotions or body sensations am I feeling as a result of what I said or did? Thoughts. What have I been thinking about what I said or did? What kind of thought patterns have I been experiencing since this happened? Have I been defensive? Have I been apologetic? Have I been confused? Have I, been in denial? What's been going on? Then the next phase is desires, or basically what do I want to happen related to what I said or did that is causing me problems now or causing me stress now? What do I want to see come out of this? Attitudes. In this phase, how have I been expressing myself to others regarding what I said or did? And what have I been getting for feedback from other people about my situation? Have they been supportive? Have they been kind of looking at me like I have six heads? Have they been kind of neutral, not really supportive, or rejecting what we've been saying? In terms of the beliefs phase, what do I believe to be real and true about my situation and what I said or did? Okay. Pretty straightforward. Values. What values or really strongly held beliefs that I have about life and how to live it may I have violated by what I said or did? So if I value loyalty, did I say something or do something that showed that I was not loyal? In the will or intention phase, what do I intend to do about what I said or did in order to address my stress related to this situation? What's my plan? And behaviors. What are actions and deeds that I can take to reasonably expect that I can reduce my stress, resolve my problems related to what I said or did that is causing me stress right now? So when it comes to taking ownership of my words and deeds as a spiritual practice under reauthorization, in terms of responsibility, how does my plan for taking ownership for my words and deeds show I have taken responsibility? How does it show I've accepted, yes, I did this, I said this, it was me, I'm not in denial, we got this, I own it? And also in terms of accountability, how does my plan for taking ownership for my words and deeds show that I have taken accountability? What shows that I'm willing to face the consequences of what I've done or said? That I'm willing to atone for that, to make things right or whole, heal it the best that I can. And again, this is doing those kinds of things without imposing our own will on someone else. So if we've done something or said something that's hurt somebody else, yeah, we may want to take ownership for that. We may want to make it right. We may want to do whatever we can to atone. We also have to recognize that folks have the right to not have us involved in their lives again after we've, hurt them or harmed them or, made them feel lousy. They have a right to say, nah, I'm good. And we have to respect that. Which makes, taking ownership a little bit more difficult, but we can still do it. Because essentially it's one-sided. This is how I'm going to change my life. And that doesn't mean I have the right to impose myself on somebody else and on their life. Take more of their time, more of their energy. No, I don't have that right. As always, folks, thank you for watching this video. The next video will be on reauthorization as a spiritual practice in substance abuse recovery. And if you saw anything in this video that was interesting, entertaining, enlightening, educational, any of those things, consider hitting the like button, please, and subscribing to the channel, hitting the notification bell, sharing these videos with like-minded individuals, and as always, leaving a comment in the comment section. Remember to try to play nice. Thanks. And we'll see you the next time. Take care, folks.